forms cow, sheep consonantal equivalents in vowel genesis meanings. Any explanations of my method of research would be superfluous in the case of the trained philologist, but as this work is intended for general use among educated people, I may be excused for presenting here a few general directions for the guidance of the reader. First of all, let us remember that vowel mutation is very important, though the causes of change are not so easily traced as in consonant mutation, which usually takes place under very definite principles of change. Cow. The Sanskrit root go, gao, means core. How small the change in 5,000 years. The Sanskrit G has advanced to K in English. The Greek is baus, bo, the Latin bos or vasha. The Mexican for cow is quaquain, pronounced ca-ca-way. Note here a curious thing. The Aztecs had no cows. The animal, if known to them, could have been known only as the bison, Bos bubalus, but their name for cow is doubtless a reduplication of the Sanskrit gao, or gaga, with e, a possessive ending. Now, how did they manage to retain this name for several thousand years intact, supposing that for a long time they were strangers to the animal? This may be explained if we assume a borrowed Assyrian root, though it is doubtful. In this connection read the phonetic mutations in chap, she, phenol ogy. Vowel mutation takes place under well-known definite rules in the Aryan languages. I ask the reader who is not a linguist to accept my statements as authoritative. I refer the philologist to my American in Aryan phonology. Max Muller says every vowel in the languages of Europe is exactly what it ought to be. If he means according to rule, the statement is too strong. If such assumption be sound philology, the root ka once meant any projecting, prominent feature or object as a horn of a cow, a pole set in the ground, and even the human hand. The Akkadians used it 5,000 years ago, and the Assyrians much later in the same sense. See Ka in Naris's Assyrian dictionary. Hence, if no Aztec had seen a cow for thousands of years, it would be in keeping with the genius of his language to resort to the old name. But I do not maintain that this actually happened, since the stag was called Mazal instead of Quaquain. In the Iowa language the root is kai. To kai, bull. Kaimi, cow, buffalo. Sheep. I will cite here curious facts in the history of a word which is at once peculiarly instructive and historically interesting. Under the article Mexico in the Encyclopedia Britannica, the author, E.B. Tyler, discussing the ancient Aztecs, eulogizes their piety as exhibited in a prayer which he quotes. The worshipper calls the attention of his god, Tezcatlipoca, to his having sacrificed a sheep to the deity. The author concludes that the prayer had been tinged by Spanish influences because no such animal as the sheep was known to the ancient Mexicans. Ichkal, sheep, is chaga, goat, in Sanskrit. Skeep, sheep, is Anglo-Saxon. Schaf, German. The phonetic changes here are: root is skag, Mexican I skag ik cactiel. The final E is dropped, giving ic heat l. In G or Mani, final E becomes P, hence skeep. The prosthetic I is common in Zend and Iranian generally. Such vowels have been termed irrational. The only puzzling case tion is, why did the transfer of meaning take place from sheep to goat? Perhaps it was the Aryans of Asia who made the transfer to goat. At any rate, the Mexicans had a word for sheep always, and in the prayer alluded to, a wild sheep may have been meant, though it is not at all improbable that the prayer may have been altered by Spanish hands. Remember, too, that the termination fluid cuts no figure in the solution. I may add that there is another derivative for I see heel, which also means cotton. Mr. Tyler derives it from ictally, thread, and sheep is thread thing, which is phonetically impossible, as shown by the cognate IC paddle, thread, where the soft ch reverts to hard e, but ikti may be the same as Sanskrit ishu, a string. Consonantal affinity and vowel genesis. The equivalence of consonants is perhaps at once the plainest and safest guide in making comparisons. To stray from this fixed principle is to err. There are some very strange exceptions, however, and the most notable perhaps of all is that by which an original GK becomes F in one language and U, P or F in another. For example, Sanskrit, Kator, for, Greek, Teteres, Welsh, Pedwar. But vowel mutation is also exigent and must not be disregarded. But this subject is fully discussed in Chap. She, Phonology. Meanings. Meaning is fully as important for pure poses of derivation as the proper genesis of letters. Possibly it is even more important sometimes. The only thing absolutely immortal is thought, and words are the enduring, almost indestructible symbols of thought. When one looks into a Sanskrit dictionary and finds that lube, 4,000 years ago, meant love as it does today, that bar meant bear, and gal meant cow, it is a matter of surprise that mere words may be imperishable. It is in fact almost certain that when the meanings of two words identical in form differ radically, that they are in no way related. Even slang may teach us concerning language. The persistence of thought forms is simply marvelous, and when words perish, the same idea mold will receive new words and the idiom appears to live forever. I remember having heard as a boy, among my native hills, the common expression, old rip, used. I looked upon it as simply slang. I cannot prove dissent, but I believe in it. The express scion cast a mild sort of obloquy upon one not deemed bad enough to be designated as an out-and-out rogue. The Sanskrit root word rip and its affiliated root lip mean cheat. Hence, to call a person a rip is really to call him a cheat, and give me none of your lip is doubtless near akin to it, though appearing to have a very different origin. There is a deviation of meaning, however, which is allowable arising from figures of speech, where simile, metonymy, synecdoche, cause transfer meanings like sheep to goat, sister to daughter, or extensions like house to family and vice versa, but leave no doubt of the original signification. But even here, the careful philologist rejects all that appears doubtful. Cow, bite, dog, sweat, elbow, ox, Indra analysis. Roofs are the basis of philological research. Roots originally may have consisted of but two letters or even of but one. In 2p, words frequently consist of a vowel, and e, for example, has nearly a score of meanings, which are differentiated by prefixes and affixes, and I is a root, to go, in Sanskrit. In Chinese, many words appear to consist of but two letters, a consonant and a vowel. In fact, some claim this to be a rule of Chinese. A compound consonant like ch or ts is counted as a single consonant. The most common form of Aryan roots appears to be consonant plus vowel consonant, as vow, to know, reveal. But Vonyik, totter, while appearing to be exception, is really a triliteral root strengthened by n. The a does not appear in Latin, where we have vacillare, totter, English vacillate. Bear in mind this strengthening, which occurs frequently in Sanskrit and Greek. This will explain the frequent disappearance of it in comparisons between Mexican and Sanskrit words. Thus man, to think, becomes mati in Mexican, but retains the a in the English word mind. 2p roots, like e, may simply have lost their consonants. Sometimes what appears to be a simple root is really a compound or extension as Sanskrit yud, to fight, which yudi, Mexican, yao choose. Cow. Very few words may be traced back wholly unmodified for any great period of time, but roots are of great antiquity. I have already mentioned the word gone, cow, as an example from the Sanskrit. But the Greeks employed bod-s, boss. Why was this? Bo may be derived from gao by means of an intermediate parasitic, gba, but bo may also have been an original root. In neo-gao we have the root in a compound, blue cow. Bite. The investigator does not always find his work so easy, as in the examples named, which are simple. Often but a small portion of a root can be traced in a word, or the whole is so transformed as to be unrecognizable. Sometimes only a single letter remains, and some obscure dialect proves the original. For example, German bison, to bite, is in Mexican wic, bad, unfortunate, English, bidden, Sanskrit, vid. This was my first derivation, but I find that forlong derives a word from an old root which appears to be pre-Aryan, bod, bud, bu, Tibetan bo and Chinese fo. He connects it with Sanskrit booted, from bu, to be, exist, hence a created being and specifically an evil spirit, our English bogey. The word was Turanian and is the Russian bog, god, Iranian baga. He does not explain the intrusion of the guttural g in Mexican and becomes u, hence sonific bad, we, dangerous, are more probably derived from bhu than from bid. This root is wholly distinct from Buddha, the name of the sage. See page 152. Dog. The names cow, sheep, dog are naturally among the oldest in any language, and dog is especially ancient. In all probability, the dog was a companion of man at the very beginning of civilization. He was even sacred animal. The oldest extant words for dog are formed round a K stem. The Sanskrit name is Kran, ck, the Greek Kion, the Latin Canis, the German Hund, the English is specialized in hound. By reference to the chapter Phonology, Gutturals, Eastern and Western, it may be seen that Sanskrit K becomes A in Germanic tongues. This leaves the English word dog out of the discussion, which will be confined to the original word with a K stem. The Mexicans have two words for dog, chichi and itzquintly or isquintly. The latter is the usual Aryan word, but in Punjabi we find kutta. The compound consonant FZ stands for an earlier S, and the I is only a prosthetic glide very common in Zend, Old Persian, and Mexican. TLI is the termination which may always be ignored. Hence the original root may in prehistoric times have been skun instead of kun. The Sanskrit C has a unique value. Derived from an original K, this sound remains K in some tongues and becomes S or shish in others. My object here is twofold. First, to bring my methods of working, in a few examples, so clearly before the reader that he may learn to distinguish disguised forms. Second, to establish the fact that these words of extreme antiquity clearly showed the Mexican to be in accord with other Indo-European tongues, or more explicitly an Aryan tongue. Sweat. On the authority of competent scholars, the statement is made that all the Aryan peoples have the common word sweat, which might indicate that the race originated in a warm climate. The Sanskrit root is svid, Greek, eidos, sados, Latin, suitor, and, curiously enough, these American Aryans of Mexico have the verb alonia, to sweat. If we concede the decay of an introductory SR, then they would be in accord with the Old World members of the family in svidionia. This is analogous to eidos, sados, but the root is probably phone. Elbow. Two or more roots may be used as the base of a vocable, verb, or noun. In Sanskrit and Mexican, bare roots may be joined into compound words. The Mexican name for elbow is molietli or molipol. Mol iklimo plus ic plus tl. Mol is the Aryan root mi in Sanskrit, to crush. Latin, mole. Greek, mile, a mill. Anglo-Saxon, meal, and molda, crushed earth. This root also meant mill in the sense of a fight as it does today. The root ink, ik, means to move unsteadily, back and forth in Sanskrit. Omitting a in a as explained, pp. 2697, we have Mexican IC, and molically is the mill mover in a loose scion to the movements of the elbow in grinding on the ancient hand mill. Piddle may be derived from pid, to press upon, or possibly from pies, which in itself means to grind, crush, mill. Molically may also be derived, perhaps more directly, from a vestin merg, rub, wipe. Finally, as an extended root, molic tli may be derived from mrj, to rub, to milk. These ideas are all closely akin. Or, the word or originally meant ball, from Sanskrit uks or vake, the sprinkler. A secondary form was uj or ug, to wet, from which we get the word hygrometer, an instrument to measure humidity. Latin, uvens, Ugvensilum, the dripping sky. Gothic, ausa, a bowl, hence English, ox, German, oxy. The old Aryans also employed this word as embodying the idea of virility, power. The Mexican is oquichli, male. It will be remarked that this latter word expands the root into two syllables, oquic, okish, instead of the Sanskrit uks, and a similar strengthening of roots also occurs in Zend. Oquichli in Mexican is the sign of the male gender as oquich mazato, a buck, ahua mazato, a doe. The name of a Vedic god has never been satisfactorily derived. I offer the following solution. The Mexican particle in has practically the force of the article the. It is always independent or detachable in Mexican and had the same use in Old Persian. Hence Indra may be analyzed. Indra, the draw. It remains to find the special meaning of draw, which does not concern us here. The Mexican god Tlaloc is certainly Indra, since in Sanskrit Indraloka means Indra's place, that is, heaven. Tlaloc is plainly, in Tla-Lok, god of the terrestrial paradise, the giver of rain, so is Indra, and patron of farmers. Tlaloc is no doubt a transfer meaning from place to lord of the place. Tlaloc was the only Mexican god who had a court. The instrument of his vengeance was the thunderbolt, all of which suggests Indra. Analysis. It is sometimes not easy to determine the root in long compound words such as occur in most Indian languages. For example, not lazochniats means, my beloved and honored friend, of which no is the pronoun my. T-lazo is clipped from flazodla, love. I see nint li, friend, becomes, by elision of I and clipping off the termination fli. Simply the mutilated fragment cninh. Tzin, honorable, is reduced to is, which combines with e, the sign of the vocative case. Temithiani, a teacher, is resolved into fe, someone, mati, to think, which becomes mokli in the dative form, and ani, a termination meaning one who does.